All right, hello and welcome back to lecture number 87. This is historical topic 8.13, the environment and natural resources from 1968 to 1980. We have one theme today, geography and the environment, and also one learning objective. That is, explain how and why policies related to the environment developed and changed from 1968 to 1980. It's going to be a short one today. We have just two historical key concepts. The first one is ideological, military, and economic concerns shaped U.S. involvement in the Middle East, with several oil crises in the region eventually sparking attempts at creating a national energy policy. So what the key concept is referring to is the 1973 OPEC embargo. This is when the United States helped Israel in the 1973 Yom Kippur War against its Arab neighbors. The Arab neighbors, which are also part of the oil-producing countries, and OPEC decide to implement an embargo on the United States, which leads to a gas shortage in the United States, and it increases price of gasoline, and because the gasoline prices go up, all other prices go up, causing inflation. So consumers become conscious of gas mileage now, and this is going to hurt the American car industry because their American car industry was making cars that used a lot of gas. They were making muscle cars because they were loud and they went really fast. So during the 1970s is when we start to see Americans choosing to buy Japanese-made cars, which are smaller and more gas efficient. The U.S. government is going to pass a new speed limit law that's going to lower speed limits to 55 miles an hour on federal highways to try and conserve gasoline. And this is giving the United States the idea that they need to be self-sufficient in their energy policy. So they're looking towards nuclear power at first because that's the most efficient. But it becomes very unpopular after the 1979 Three Mile Island nuclear power plant meltdown. You can see that people are cleaning up the nuclear waste, which leaks from the reactor, and Jimmy Carter ends up going into the melted plant after it had already been cleaned up. You see him in the top right. He's wearing protection on his shoes, but nowhere else. So at the very least, his feet are going to be fine. All right, and then our second key concept, environmental problems and accidents led to a growing environmental movement that aimed to use legislative and public efforts to combat pollution and protect natural resources. The federal government established new environmental programs and regulations. Now, these problems and accidents, you got to know at least two or three of these. First, we're going to see the use of pesticides and their impact on the rest of nature and on people in Rachel Carson's Silent Spring. So she's talking about the pesticides that farmers are using on their crops to kill any vermin from ruining their crop yield. Those pesticides sometimes can be carcinogens, and they can hurt the people who are living nearby when they are sprayed, or even the people who are eating the crops that are being sold from these farms. And then if there's too much pesticides that are being used, then they're going to not all going to be absorbed by the field where they're being sprayed, but there's going to be runoff, and it's going to affect other natural areas and affect other habitats. We also see the Cuyahoga River in Ohio was one of the most polluted rivers in the country, and there was a large oil slick in the river that was created from all the polluting and from all the waste that was being dumped into it. It caught fire, so there was an actual river that was on fire, and that really was a wake-up call for the people in Ohio that their rivers are part of the natural resources that they need to look after and that they need to conserve. With the Love Canal disaster, this was a toxic waste site that ends up spilling into the surrounding community, makes a lot of people sick, and this is going to establish the Superfund Act. So whenever polluting companies break the law because they pollute, any penalties that they have to pay goes into this large Superfund. So anytime that there's a large disaster that needs to be cleaned up, the Superfund is going to pay for the cleanup. The environmental movement was very successful at getting legislation passed. We had the Wilderness Act in 1964. The Environmental Protection Agency is created in 1970 as a result of the Clean Air Act. Earth Day is established in 1970 as well. We passed the Endangered Species Act in 1973, which requires an impact report, an environmental impact report, before any new buildings are built on certain types of land. The Clean Water Act in 1977, and like we said, the Superfund Act in 1980. So at this point, Americans are starting to realize that the world that they live in is not have infinite resources. And one of the things that made them realize, believe it or not, is the moon landing, when Americans were able to see for the very first time what the Earth looked like from somewhere outside in the universe that's not the Earth. They had never gotten this view, and so it makes it feel like the Earth is more fragile when you view it from the moon. All right, so that was a short one. Here's our recap. The United States looked to increase its energy independence after the oil embargo in 1973, and environmental disasters prompted government action and regulation of environmental use and natural resources. So at this point, we are still in the pattern where we are using the government to try and solve societal problems. We're going to start to see a change in future lectures and a backlash against this course of action when dealing with societal problems. All right, but we will see all of that next time. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you then.